The couple spent a beautiful afternoon together and went to bed that night without a worry. Sometime later, the man awakened after hearing people rushing outside and sensed a wave of confusion beyond the walls. The scene shifted abruptly when the man suddenly woke again, realizing that everything he had just experienced had only been a dream. He turned toward his son, who was sleeping soundly beside him. Moments later, the trembling of an earthquake startled the boy awake, and the man gently reassured him that everything was all right.
Papa!
Society had collapsed long ago, and the world itself was slowly approaching its final breath. Animals had died out, and vegetation had vanished until even dried trees were no longer present. Most of humanity had already perished, and the few who remained survived only by consuming other people. Those who refused to eat human flesh either starved to death or ended their own lives, unable to bear the suffering. There was no hope, no future, and no possibility of salvation for mankind.
I haven't kept a calendar for years.
In this unforgiving environment, a man traveled with his young son. They moved across the barren landscape of the planet in search of whatever resources they could gather. As they walked down an empty road, they pushed a shopping cart filled with what little food and water they had managed to collect along the way. When they reached an abandoned gas station, the man searched for gasoline but found none. Both father and son looked sickly and exhausted, struggling to maintain their strength.
They're peopled by refugees towing carts and gangs carrying weapons.
The surroundings were silent and lifeless. There were no vehicles, no human figures, and no animals anywhere in sight. Yet the man knew that other survivors still existed. These survivors were forced to eat human flesh because there was nothing else left to consume, and they would kill any stranger they encountered without hesitation.
Within a year, there were fires on the ridges.
While traveling, the father and son avoided these cannibalistic groups and faced freezing temperatures that forced them to stay wrapped in warm clothing throughout both day and night. That night they made camp, and the father read stories to his boy before they drifted to sleep. In the middle of the night, a fire nearby forced them to awaken and continue their journey through the darkness.
You could whip the food off your plate without using your hand.
By the next morning, they entered a barn in search of food and found human bodies hanging from the rafters. The sight terrified the boy, but the father explained that those people had taken their own lives to escape the horrors of the world. Outside, the man held a gun in his hands and asked his son if he remembered how to use it. He quietly reminded the boy that if he ever needed to end his own life, he should put the barrel inside his mouth and pull the trigger so that it would be quick. The boy looked shaken, and the father embraced him tightly. In a distant memory, the man recalled how his wife had gone into labor after the collapse of society. She had not wanted to bring a child into such a world, yet she gave birth with her husband's help, and together they welcomed their son into a dying planet.
You gotta push.
Sometime later, the father, named John, slept with his son inside an abandoned vehicle. He woke when he heard voices and noticed a truck full of armed men driving toward them. John quickly grabbed his son and hid with him in a ditch, hoping to avoid detection. The truck experienced mechanical issues, forcing the group to stop and investigate. One of the men separated from the others to relieve himself and accidentally discovered John and the boy in the ditch. John pointed his gun at the man and demanded that he stay quiet. The man refused, stating that John did not look capable of killing anyone. He invited John and the boy to join them, claiming they had food to share. John rejected the offer, knowing that the men intended to kill them for meat. The man admitted that they ate whatever they could find and clearly implied that humans were their primary source of food. He added that John seemed like someone who had never killed before. John agreed but explained that he would do anything necessary to protect his child. The man kept staring at John's son again and again, his eyes fixed on the boy in a way that made John tense. Then, without warning, he grabbed the child and pressed a knife to the boy's neck. John ordered him to let go of the boy, speaking with as much control as he could manage, but the man ignored him and refused to cooperate. John reacted quickly, raised the gun and fired, killing the man on the spot. The gunshot echoed through the area and caught the attention of the rest of the group, who immediately started moving toward the sound. Before they could arrive, John lifted his son onto his shoulder and ran away from the place as fast as he could. While escaping, he found a spot where they could hide and stayed there with his son, keeping him close and away from most of the armed people. He tried to calm the boy, telling him softly that he would keep him safe, even though he was terrified himself. At one point, John even raised the gun toward his own son, thinking about ending the child's suffering, but he could not bring himself to pull the trigger. The boy was innocent, and John could not harm him. In this world that felt worse than hell, many people no longer wished to live, yet John kept going, driven only by his love for his son and his need to protect him. John and his son stayed hidden in that place for the rest of the night. When morning came, they carefully made their way back to the car where they had slept earlier. Their shopping cart was still there, but everything inside it was gone. All their food and supplies had been taken. Nearby, John saw the remains of a human body and realized that the cannibals must have found the area. He remembered how in the past his wife had asked him if they should commit suicide. She had told him that if the cannibals found them, they would rape her and their son, and then kill them and eat them. John refused the idea, insisting that they had to fight for their son and keep trying to live. His wife, however, had already lost hope and no longer wanted to continue in such a world.
I should have done it a long time ago. I should have done it when we had more bullets. I don't know why I listened to you.
With nothing left, father and son set off on the road once again. They camped somewhere that night, and John told his son that the man he had killed earlier was a bad man. The boy then asked if they themselves were good people, and John told him that they were, and that they would remain good no matter what happened. Later, they entered an abandoned shop and searched everywhere for something to eat, but they found almost nothing. John did manage to find an old can of Coke, and he gave it to his son. The boy, who had never tasted it before, drank it slowly, enjoyed it, and thanked his father. As they continued their journey, they noticed a truck standing in the middle of the road. They decided to use it as shelter and stayed inside that truck for the night. As they were about to fall asleep, the boy said that he wished he were dead like his mother. Those words shattered John inside. He told his son that it was a bad thing to say and reminded him that they would reach the south soon and find something to eat. The two of them then spent the night in the truck, holding on to that small hope.
I wish I was with my mom.
The next morning, John woke up inside the truck. He stepped outside and walked toward a nearby bridge, holding a photograph of his wife. After looking at it for a moment, he threw the photo away. He then took off his wedding ring and removed it from his finger, letting go of what little remained of his old life. He remembered the last day he saw his wife. She had told him that she had given up and was ready to die. She told John to take their son and travel south because they had heard that far in the south, there was still a place where a group of people lived together in some kind of settlement. However, they did not have enough food or supplies for all three of them to travel that far as a family. Because of this, John's wife handed him the gun, which still had 2 bullets left. She told him that from this point on, he and their son had to continue alone, and that she would not be going with them. She explained that if they ever faced unbearable danger or suffering along the way, he should use the gun on himself and on their son. Then she removed her warm coat and hat, even though the weather was freezing, because she wanted John to take them for the journey ahead. John begged her to stay for at least one more night so he could have a little more time with her, but she told him that was no longer possible. By doing that, she chose to end her life. That moment became the last time John ever saw his wife. He could not stop her, and he could not save her. The story returns to the present. John and his son reach a river and take the opportunity to wash themselves and rest for a while, trying to regain a little strength. After spending some time there, they continue traveling, still determined to reach the south no matter what obstacles or dangers they may encounter along the way. As they move forward through the silent landscape, they come across an abandoned house and decide to go inside, hoping to find something that might help them survive. Once they enter, they notice pots, pans, and utensils scattered in the kitchen, suggesting that someone had recently been preparing food there. John becomes increasingly desperate because they have almost nothing to eat. While searching the kitchen, John notices a hidden hatch beneath a wooden table. He assumes there might be food stored underneath, so he breaks the key, opens the hatch, and climbs down into a lower compartment with his son behind him. Instead of food, he finds several starving people imprisoned there, all of them in terrible condition and clearly being kept as captives. When they see John, they run toward him, begging for help, and he quickly climbs back up out of fear. Before he and his son can escape the building, the house owners return. They are armed with guns, and John immediately understands the danger they are in. Realizing what would happen if they are captured by these cannibals, John leads his son upstairs. He knows that if these people catch them, they will likely be killed and eaten. With only a single bullet left in his gun, John raises the weapon toward his son's head. He would rather give his child a quick and less painful death than let him suffer a brutal one. Just as he prepares to pull the trigger, the captives in the compartment below begin banging on the door, trying to break it open. The noise draws the attention of the house owners, who rush toward the sound to investigate. This sudden distraction gives John and his son a small chance to escape, and they immediately flee the house.
What are you doing?
Outside, they hide in the bushes. Two people from the house come out and scan the area with binoculars, trying to spot anyone who might have escaped. John and his son remain hidden for a long time, barely moving. When things finally become quiet, they slip away and reach a small clearing that feels safer. John gives his son a small piece of bread, telling him that it is their last bit of food. The boy asks if they would ever eat a human, and John calmly says that they would not. The boy asks again, wondering if they would still refuse even if they were starving to death. John replies that they are starving now, yet they have not done it because they are the good guys. Still, he admits that without food they cannot survive much longer, and the idea begins to weigh on him. The two continue traveling and eventually reach another house. John tells his son that it is the house where he grew up, and he takes him inside to show him the rooms and explain small details about his childhood. The boy is not very interested, so he sits outside while his father keeps looking around. Suddenly, the boy sees another child in a building across from the house and immediately runs toward him. John stops him and tells him that they cannot help. The boy insists that they should try, but John refuses and carries him away, and they continue heading south.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Each day, they become more exhausted and hungrier. One day, the boy asks if they are going to die now. John tells him that dying is not easy because starvation takes time. Later, they enter another house and search for food. John looks everywhere but finds nothing, not even scraps. When they go upstairs, they find a corpse lying on a bed. John takes a blanket from the body and gives it to his son for warmth. He goes to the living room and breaks down, realizing that they are running out of time. Trying to comfort his son, he sits at a dusty piano and plays a song, explaining that it was the music his wife used to play. When they leave through the backyard, John notices a closed bunker. He walks down into it and discovers a well-organized storage room filled with food, water, and plenty of supplies. After starving for so long, this sight brings him overwhelming relief. He calls his son down, and they eat as much as they can, finally feeling full. They set up their things and rest comfortably for the first time in a long while.
Bears.
That night, John prepares a warm meal, and they fall asleep with full stomachs. The next morning, John boils water, and they take showers, clean their clothes, trim their hair, and make themselves look fresh again. That evening, he cooks for them once more, and they enjoy another good meal. As they are finishing dinner, they hear noises coming from above. The boy suggests it might be a dog, but John knows it is not. He tells his son that the bunker is no longer safe and that they must leave immediately.
Can I help you with someone?
Who?
The next morning, John and his son gathered as much food as they could carry from the basement storage and resumed their journey. While walking down the road, they noticed an older man traveling ahead of them. The man assumed they were following him and shouted that he had nothing to offer. To prove it, he threw his small bag toward John and told him to check it for himself. John calmly replied that they were not thieves and had no intention of robbing him. The old man looked weak and exhausted. John's son quietly asked if they could share some of their food with him. John refused at first, but after a moment of hesitation, he agreed. The boy gave the old man a small box of food.
We're not robbers.
When John realized that the stranger was just another traveler struggling to survive, he asked if he would like to join them for dinner. The old man hesitated, unsure if he should trust them, but eventually agreed. That night, they made camp and sat together while eating their meal. During dinner, the old man said that when he first saw the boy, he thought he had died because the child looked like an angel. He explained that he had not seen a child in many years. John told him that his son meant everything to him and that, in his eyes, the boy was like a god. The old man then revealed that he once had a son as well, but others had killed him. He added that in a world like this, everyone has suffered, and trust had disappeared long ago. They slept in the same place that night. In the morning, the old man packed up and left alone. John's son wished the stranger could travel with them because he had not spoken to anyone besides his parents in a very long time. Despite that, John believed that bringing another person along would slow them down and consume their remaining supplies. He did not try to stop the old man from leaving. After the stranger was gone, John and his son continued toward the south.
He's gonna die and you don't care.
They traveled through a forest and hid some of their food there, planning to retrieve it later. Soon John noticed drops of blood staining the white snow, and he instantly understood that danger was close. Not long after, they witnessed a group of armed men chasing a woman and her small child. John urged his son to hide, and they quickly took cover in the bushes. The armed men captured the woman and her child and killed them without hesitation. As John and the boy lay hidden, the ground began shaking violently. An earthquake struck, causing enormous trees to fall around them. The boy was terrified, so John reassured him that they would survive, and they crawled beneath a fallen tree for safety. When the shaking stopped and the noise faded, they left the area and camped somewhere else. The next morning, John woke up coughing heavily, his health worsening with each passing day. Even though he was growing weaker, he tried to stay hopeful. His son woke up from a nightmare, disturbed and afraid. John told him that dreams meant he was still fighting and that he must continue to fight. Later, John showed his son a map and explained that they were now very close to the sea. He told him that once they reached the coast, they would follow it toward the south. The boy asked if the sea was blue in color, and John answered that it used to be blue and very beautiful. The child had never seen the ocean before, so he imagined it through his father's words and memories.
Is it blue?
When they finally reached the shore, they discovered that the sea looked nothing like what John had described. The water was dark, almost black, and the coastline was filled with dried trees that burst into flames whenever lightning struck. Smoke drifted through the air, and the sky was still covered, as if the sun had vanished. John apologized to his son for the color of the sea. They sat quietly on what had once been a peaceful beach. The boy asked what existed on the other side of the water, and John told him that he did not know. He added that maybe a father and son were sitting on the opposite shore, just like them. They camped near the beach and spent the night there. The boy soon became ill, and John began to worry. The child asked what John would do if he died. John answered that he would also die because he could not imagine living without him. The next day, John used his binoculars to scan the coastline. Far out on the dark water, he noticed an old and damaged ship stuck in place. The vessel looked abandoned, rusted, and barely intact. After examining it for a moment, John handed the gun to his son for protection. There was still one bullet left, and John wanted the boy to have it while he was gone. John entered the water and began swimming toward the ship, hoping to find anything useful inside. While John was gone, the boy waited on the shore. Exhausted from the long journey, he eventually fell asleep beside their belongings. Sometime later, someone approached without waking him. When the boy opened his eyes, he saw footprints pressed into the sand and realized that a stranger had stolen everything they had. Their blankets, food, and tools were gone, leaving him with nothing but the gun in his hands. John later returned from the ship in a small boat carrying a few items he had managed to recover. When he reached the beach, his son told him that someone had taken all of their supplies. John noticed that his own shoes were missing too, and now he had no choice but to walk barefoot on the rough coastline.
It's okay. I fell asleep.
Don't lose heart. We're gonna get it back.
Determined to find the thief, John lifted his son onto his shoulders and followed the footprints along the sand. After some time, they finally saw the man who had robbed them. The sharp stones and broken debris cut into John's feet as he walked, and the pain became intense. But he continued until he caught up with the stranger. Once he reached him, John pointed the gun and demanded that he return everything he had taken. The man was armed with a knife, but it was clear that he was terrified. John ordered him to return the shoes and the rest of the belongings, or he would shoot. The boy begged his father not to hurt the stranger, and even the thief urged John to listen. Eventually, the man surrendered their possessions, handed over his knife, and stood trembling. John forced him to remove his clothing and place it with the pile of belongings. The thief pleaded, saying he had stolen only because he was starving and that he would probably die if left there without food. John ignored his words and left with the trolley.
You don't mind doing it to us?
I'm begging, please.
Papa!
Listen to the boy, man.
The boy became upset at his father for treating the man so harshly. He argued that they should have helped him because he was hungry and afraid. John replied that he too was scared every day and that he was the one who had to worry about everything. The boy raised his voice and shouted at him. After thinking about it, John admitted that his son was right, and they walked back to where they had left the man. When they reached the spot, the stranger was gone. The boy placed some of his own clothes and a small amount of food on the ground in case the man returned. Then they continued onward.
She's hungry.
As they traveled, they passed near a house. Without warning, an arrow struck the ground close to them. John and his son quickly moved behind the trolley for protection. A second arrow was fired, and this one struck John's leg. When John had explored the ship earlier, he had found a flare gun and brought it with him. He now pulled it out and fired a shot toward the house. The flare exploded through a window, and a moment later, John heard a woman screaming inside.
Son of a bitch!
Despite the pain in his injured leg, John rushed into the house with the gun. Inside, he saw the man who had attacked them lying dead from the flare gun shot. A woman stood beside the body weeping. John demanded to know why they had been following him and his son. The woman insisted that they had never been following anyone. She claimed that it was John who had been behind them and that he had killed the man without reason. In truth, people had become so afraid that everyone believed someone was chasing them, while in reality, most were only trying to survive and could no longer trust anyone at all. After this exchange, John decided to leave. He walked away from the house with his son and found a place that felt safer and more hidden. There he pulled the arrow out of his leg. The pain was intense and almost unbearable, but he forced himself to stay conscious and steady. Once the arrow was out, he wrapped a bandage around the wound as carefully as he could and rested for a short while, trying to catch his breath. He and his son then continued their journey, but John's condition grew much worse. With every step, his strength declined until he could no longer walk properly. He told his son that he could not pull the trolley anymore and that they would have to leave it behind. They chose only the items they absolutely needed, put them into a bag, and abandoned the cart on the road. Before they could go very far, John collapsed on the ground from exhaustion, and father and son were forced to spend the night at that very spot. The next morning, it was clear that John no longer had the strength to walk even a single step. He understood that his journey was coming to an end. He told his son that from now on he must continue alone. John gave him the gun, which still contained one bullet, and told him to always keep it with him for protection. He instructed his son to travel in the same way they had done so far and to keep heading toward the south, no matter how difficult it might become. Hearing this, the boy broke down in tears. He reminded his father that he had promised they would stay together, but now John was unable to keep that promise, even though he truly wanted to. The son said that he would not leave and that he wanted to stay with his father. He asked John to let him go wherever he was going. John told him softly that he could not do that. That night, the boy lay down beside his father, held close to him, and fell asleep there.
You have to let me go.
When the boy woke up the next morning, he realized that his father had died. He was deeply saddened and began to cry, but he also understood that he could not remain there forever. He had to leave his father's body behind and move on alone, just as John had told him. He took the gun, still loaded with a single bullet, and his father's binoculars, holding them tightly as the last things that connected him to his father. Then he turned away and began to walk.
Papa!
After going a short distance, he saw a figure approaching him on the road. This person was also carrying a gun. The boy raised his weapon and pointed it at the stranger, his hands shaking but firm. The man asked if the body lying behind him was his father. The boy answered that it was his father, but he was gone now. The man told him to lower his gun, but the boy refused and said that he would not give it up. The man calmly reassured him that he did not want his gun. He only wanted him to point it away. The boy then asked if the man was a good person. John had once told his son to search for good people in the world, so he repeated that idea out loud. The man replied that he and the people with him were good and that they would not harm him. He explained to the boy that he had two choices. He could stay where he was, alone, with his father's dead body, or he could come along with them.
So you got two choices here.
The boy asked if the man had children with him as well. The man said yes and explained that his whole family was there, including his wife, his son, and his daughter, and that his children were about the same age as the boy. Hearing this, the child went back to his father's body one last time. He told his father that he loved him very much, that he would never forget him, and that he would continue to speak to him every day in his own way. He kissed his father for the final time, and then walked over to join the group of people with whom he must now travel.
And are you carrying the fire?
There he saw that the man had been telling the truth. The man's wife, son, and daughter were present, and they also had a dog with them. The woman told the boy that they had been following him and his father for quite some time and asked if he had never noticed. The boy explained that he had not realized anyone was behind them. She told him that he no longer needed to be scared because he was safe with their family now. The boy watched them with cautious, frightened eyes. He knew that trust was almost gone from the world and that many survivors had turned into cannibals. He thought it was still possible that these people could be like that too. Even so, he prepared himself to go with them and continued his journey in their company, not knowing what would happen next.